toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Tonight our class is on modulating consciousness. And I was thinking about some previous classes that we've had and how this fits in with them. And I really didn't think about that until today. We've had classes talking about presence and the fact that presence is something that is emergent. It's not something that's already there when we are fully in connection with whatever we're experiencing. Then presence emerges. We've talked about the aim of the Sufi is to harmonize with everyone in all situations. And the last class, we talked about vibrations, the different frequency levels on which our being exists and on which reality exists. So tonight kind of ties all this together when we talk about modulating consciousness. Normally when we experience whatever it is that we're experiencing, we operate from our conditioned and dualistic frame of reference or vantage point. I am here, I am experiencing something, or it can just be I'm thinking about. So when we hear the word consciousness, usually thinking comes into that association with that. So the way we go about thinking about things, we think of as our consciousness. We can say, well, I can focus my consciousness on different things. I can look around the room and I can focus my consciousness on anybody that's here. I could focus it on the lamp sitting over there. I could focus it on the sounds outside. I could pick any number of things to focus consciousness on, but that's just a very elementary aspect of consciousness. I'm separated from what I am experiencing, and I'm aiming, so to speak, the lens of my awareness on a particular something or other. And then usually the next step would be to have thoughts about what we're experiencing. So I can look at a person, then I can think, oh, I see that you are fill in the blank, or I imagine that you're feeling so-and-so, or you look like you have a lot of light, or you look like you've had a hard week, and so on. But I'm analyzing the input that's coming in. But once again, I'm really separating myself from what I'm experiencing when I do that. Okay. So in meditation, we think about, oftentimes talk about, well, we're going to learn how to raise our consciousness. We talk about wanting to get into a higher state of consciousness. We have terms like peak experiences. We're going to experience a higher realm up there, or something, the other realm. Again, feeling that it's something separated from ourselves. But as we've talked about, and as Hazrat Nayat Khan has said, that the human being is the only being in all of existence who exists in all the realms. We always exist in all the realms. However, our awareness is generally very limited to the physical realm and limited to mental constructs about the physical realm, and limited to emotional constructs about the feelings that we have about what we're experiencing. And so let me read you a few quotes. This is Pir Vilayat. In fact, meditation could be looked upon as the art of modulating consciousness from the usual local and middle range setting. So I can use the example of a receiver, let's say a receiver that's part of your sound system. You could adjust the controls so you only hear things out of one channel, and it's just monaural. And you could turn the equalizer down so you don't really get any range of treble or bass, and you can make sense of things. You can hear the words to the song, you can hear the melody, but it's very flat. It would be like if you had a cold and you couldn't smell or taste much of anything. And then we could, okay, let me readjust the equalizer settings so now I get variation. Let me make it stereo, or let me make it quadraphonic, or many systems, maybe they have 7 different sound channels systems, so the sound sounds like it's coming from all around you. So we can expand the range of just auditory perception with something like that. Well, much more so can we expand the range of what we can experience when we open up to the multiple levels on which we have our existence. And here I'm just referring back to things we've talked about many times in the past that I won't go into detail. We exist on many realms. Our awareness is embryonic or latent. There are many tools that we've used and worked with in our meditations together, and many of you have worked with them individually, that help us to be able to experience other realms such as the angelic realm or the jinn realm and so on. So that's the next step, to be able to experience a wider range. And then the step after that is what Pierre Vilayet calls stereoscopic consciousness. I call it multimodal consciousness, is to be able to experience simultaneously many levels of existence at once. Just like if you listen to a chord on an organ, you can hear all the notes and you can hear the overtones and undertones of it. So being able to experience that whole range at the same time, focalizing consciousness on what we are wanting to experience, because we can't walk around in that state of being fully tuned into everything in every realm. You don't want to drive if you're in that state. But it's good to be able to feel that as a part of our being. Okay, so how do we go about modulating consciousness? What does that mean? Well, we might think of it as initially, okay, I'd like to experience the light of the angelic realm, so I'm going to imagine what that light is like. And imagery is very important, imagination is very important. See if I can picture that, and then maybe you begin to have an experience of it. But once you begin to experience it, it's no longer a matter of your will. You're not trying to boost yourself up to this other vibrational level of experience. It's naturally a part of your own being. So you're just pulling out the stop so you can experience through that particular vibrational frequency range, so to speak, of your being. And then it's natural to experience that kind of light, that angelic light, which the Sufis say is the uncreated light, or the all-pervading light. And then perhaps you discover, and many of you have worked with a practice called the zikr of light, where the head goes in a circle and you're surveying the light of your aura. As the head goes up, you're raising your awareness to the angelic spheres, and then as the head goes back down, you feel like you're bringing that light down into your physical being, like a beam of light from your third eye to the solar plexus, and it's charging your aura with this new light, and your aura is transformed. But then the next time you do that practice, when you survey your aura has become enriched, and the next time you raise your head back up, there's what we call the returning light that goes to the angelic realm from the physical realm, and so that light has been transformed. So there's this continual interplay of these two realms. And now your consciousness is able to gradually be able to take this all in at once, this cyclic kind of interplay that's going on. So it takes some practice to go beyond what we could call a linear consciousness. What's a linear consciousness? It's like you're at one end of something and you feel like you're experiencing something up there or out there, and then relating it back to here. Gradually, and many, many practices that we've been doing for some of you over the years involve a relational way of experiencing the world. And so there's this circulation between yourself and what you're experiencing, this continual interplay of your own light and the light of what you're experiencing. And those two kinds of light are continually transforming each other. And so now consciousness can step into a cognizance or an awareness of this ongoing process without pulling yourself out of it and thinking, which is our tendency, oh, this is really wonderful, this feels so good, I have to remember this and so on. That's well and good, but it's pulling you out of the presence of the experience. So here we want to imagine we're making a recipe, and the recipe says, be sure you stir in with your consciousness presence. Keep them both going. Don't just feel like you can have consciousness without presence, or presence without a consciousness that can encompass more than yourself, separated from what you're experiencing. They come in together. So, one way of talking about what's the process of awakening about? The process of awakening is being able to make that quantum leap from the habitual, usual, separated, linear, dualistic way of experiencing into one that's right in the thick of things, in which you always maintain the uniqueness of your being and the uniqueness of the light of your being in relationship with what you're experiencing. And now consciousness can be modulated not just to become aware of something, but as a creative tool. Consciousness can help to bring something forth. And so now we're mixing something else into the hopper here, our recipe. And what is that? That's desire. We've talked before about how the Sufis view desire very differently than most other spiritual traditions, and feel that every desire begins with a divine impulse, and that impulse may have gotten very distorted, but when we can recover the original impulse, but then the impulse itself is transformed and evolved by our own intention and our own experiences in the world to help bring something forth that can only come through the relationship between our manifest self and whatever you want to call, sometimes I just say the rest of myself, our transcendent self, our personal angel, our personal Lord, the divine being, that ray from the divine central sun, that we are that whole ray, and both sides are always in relationship with each other, and it's the interplay of those two sides that helps to bring something forth in the new creation. So, this has been several mouthfuls here. Think of this, consciousness, to kind of sum up. Consciousness on the most basic level is just an awareness of something initially felt to be separate from ourselves. And then consciousness can be pulled back into kind of a color commentary in our mind of what we've experienced. So that's ground zero, you could say, of consciousness. Consciousness can be awakened to different vibrational levels of existence on which we exist, to be able to experience what takes place on those different vibrational levels, which are called the subtle planes, the subtle realms, and so on, higher spheres. So consciousness can be used to help us become aware, but then we can learn how to experience ourselves in a unitive sense, with simultaneous different levels of consciousness interplaying with each other. So this is pretty good, right? You get to there, that's great. And you might think, well, what else is there? What else do I need? Well, that's the higher base level from which we can now participate in what takes place in the new creation, which is always going on, by our full presence and by our experience of the circulation of what takes place through that presence, through that opened up spectrum of vibration that we're now capable of, and we then have something to do based on our own desire, the deep desire of our heart, to help bring something forth that could only come from our experiencing things in this way and our relationship with what we're experiencing. Okay, so let me read you some more things. Well, before I get to that, I've talked about how we can focus consciousness in a very basic way in physical manifestation, present time and space. Focus it on something that's in the room with us, focus it on something that's not physically present, but we certainly can tune into loved ones that are not with us, or we can tune into a place we've been or a place that we want to go to. So we've got a pretty good range of what we can do with our consciousness in the physical realm in present time and space. But also we can use consciousness to experience things in the past and in the future. So consciousness now can be focalized through different aspects of time: past, present, future. Okay? Consciousness can be used to focalize through different aspects of space. I remember my dad, when I was young, telling me that the mind was the most powerful tool that there was, because the mind can imagine anything. The mind can imagine the end of the universe in an instant. Just anything. It's a remarkable tool that we have. So we can extend consciousness in space. We can extend it in different directions in time. We can use it to experience subtle realms. And Pirvalaya talked about 4 directions. He called them the 4 directions of meditation. But as he said in this quote I read, meditation can be thought of as a way of modulating consciousness to step outside the usual limited range. So we could think of these 4 directions as 4 different ways to modulate consciousness. So one is turning within. And this is experiencing within our own being how we are interconnected with everything else that exists across time, across space, beyond time, beyond space. If you know what a fractal is, we have lots of fern plants growing out there. Fractal is something that has the property of self-similarity. So if you look at a fern leaf, the whole plant, and then you look at one of the leaves, it's the same structure. You look at broccoli, you can go down and down, it's the same structure repeated, smaller and smaller scales. So we can think of the nature of our being is fractal-like, and what that means is, because we're interconnected with everything, if we want to experience the consciousness of something else, let's say another person or a master, saint, prophet, we can find that person within our own being, within the fractal of our own being, where they are interconnected with us instantaneously. There's no time involved. We don't have to think, well, we're going across time in the past when they physically lived on the earth, or if they're at a different location on the planet. We don't have to imagine we're sending our consciousness out across the world. If that's where they are, we can find them within ourselves. So that's one, we could say, dimension of consciousness. And another is the transcendental dimension. And this is being in a state of samadhi, being in a state where all the sense of self and other and object has disappeared, and we're just merged into a oneness that there's no words for, which is a very wonderful, delightful state. And there was a time in Pirvalaya's teachings where that was the emphasis, but then it was like, well, that's, wonderful, but that's not the whole reason why we're here, just to experience that. We're here to awaken divinity in life. So another Well, there's two other directions. One is the cosmic dimension, where we can have some mystical experience of all sorts of things, other realms of being, and so on. And then the final one is awakening in life, which is the aim of our particular Sufi tradition, to really bring the fullness of our being, the presence of that, into life. And the life that we bring it into is not the same as what people might call the truncated world that we thought that was all that there was. Because we live in a world in which there are so many filters that we put on, the collective consciousness puts on, that's just the status quo. So there's little impetus to feel that there could be anything more than that. But it's like if we had some filters on our eyes, we're blocking out some colors, we couldn't see them, and then we take them off. Oh, things are a lot richer than I thought they were. So there's that dimension of consciousness. So consciousness is an incredible tool, and its partner would be creative imagination. So creative imagination is the way that we use our consciousness for a purpose. Pir Vilayat would say every time we sit and meditate, we should have an intention or a purpose for our meditation. Each of us, as I've said before, quoting Ibn Arabi, has access to a unique part of the divine wisdom that no one in all the existence, past, present, or future, ever can or will have access to. We have something we can bring into existence that is incredibly precious. And it comes through by us fulfilling what is called in Hinduism and Buddhism our dharma, our purpose, and that purpose is different for each person. There's no generic spiritual purpose. We're all supposed to become like such and such. If there's anything we're supposed to become like, it's ourself. Hazrat Inayat Khan said spirituality is a process of becoming a natural human being. Said it's not to become an angel, and when talking about psychic powers, clairaudience, clairvoyance, he said that some people by nature are able to experience those kinds of things. That doesn't make them more spiritual. It's not the purpose of spirituality, and it can become a significant distraction. One of the little beautiful quotes of Hazrat Inayat Khan is, "Pick not flowers on the path, they will detain you." So we may have, perhaps everyone listening to this at some point may have had some kind of mystical experience which may have been incredibly wonderful, and our tendency is wanting to go back and have that same experience again. We can't have that experience. That was a one-time deal. But we want to have an experience of life that doesn't necessarily have to have bells and whistles with it. It's an experience where the world is enriched, where there's a deep feeling of meaningfulness in our being. There's a way of our perceiving and experiencing circumstances that enables us to aspire for this wonderful term Hazrat Inayat Khan had of the smiling forehead. And that doesn't mean going around with a big smile on your face when there's terrible things going on in the world, and there certainly are, but it's like this deep inner sense of well-beingness that can't be shaken by external circumstances. So again, consciousness is a part of that mix that enables us to aspire to that. Okay. Now, what happens when we're not in these deeper aspects of consciousness? Our consciousness is a very powerful tool to enable us to get caught up big time into, made some notes, worries about the future, guilt from the past, collective negative thought streams that can be very powerful. Hazrat Inayat Khan talked about something, I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, muwakkil, which are thought forms that we generate with our thoughts, and he said they have a life of their own. Some of them exist very briefly, some of them last a long time, and you can imagine when there's many, many people having similar thought forms, particularly if they're negative ones, they're very powerful. We can see that going on in the world. Well, when we think, well, what can we do? This seems so bleak. Well, we can put out positive energy and thought forms by being able to see past the surface appearance of things. So we can modulate consciousness by opening up to a deeper way of experiencing anything, situations, circumstances, and as I've talked about before, I've said that I believe that everything without exception is potentially a portal to the sacred, that something can break through, and it doesn't mean that that circumstance is going to magically turn into something beautiful or wonderful. No, it may not change at all, but something is brought into beingness by our way of relating to it. There's a seed planted for possibilities that were not there before. So we can have, I remember reading in one of the books by I think it was one of the Buddhist teachers, and there was this beautiful line in there, this is when the Vietnam War was going on. He said, I made a cup of tea and I stopped the war. I've told this story before, that I was at a 2-week retreat in the high desert country in New Mexico in 1982, and we were meditating on silence hours a day with Pir Balaya, and at some point during the retreat he said, well, you know, I really am reluctant to disturb, you know, the sacredness and the peacefulness of our retreat here, but I need to let you know that there's been war going on with Israel in the Middle East, and I don't remember the other countries, Palestine. Well, it's the 6 days of war. And he said, and here we are, you know, up in the mountains just meditating. You know, we can't go over there and, you know, bring about peace, but what we can do, there's this group of like 70 or 80 experienced meditators who said, let's meditate on an intention for peace in the situation. And he was meeting with us once or twice a day, and when he met with us the next day, he said the war stopped. And I'm not saying we did that, but maybe millions of other people doing the same thing did that. So the power of beings aligned in their consciousness with a common intention is exponentially more than what separated individuals can do, no matter how good their intentions are, if they're just feeling like they're operating from their own being. So now here's another sales pitch for why you should buy getting your consciousness to a place where you can do more with it. It's an incredibly powerful tool to bring about change in the world. And I really believe it's the only way that some long-standing problems of human beings are ever going to be changed, when enough people have a sufficient degree of awakening that they can align their consciousness with a common intention and hold that. So we are not powerless. So here's some more quotes here. A person who can experience joy and sorrow by raising their consciousness to the plane which the Sufis call Malakut, it's the angelic realm, can make their heaven in themselves. The great poets, thinkers, writers who have lived through difficulties, through poverty, through circumstances in which people did not understand them, opposed them, and even despised them, have lived a happy life, most happy life, for the reason that they've been able to raise themselves to that plane where they could enjoy all the beauty, comfort, and joy that the ordinary person can only enjoy if it's given to them on the physical plane. And when the key of this plane comes into the hands of a person, they are the master of their future life. Does the soul in its life on earth and after change its place? The soul does not change its place. The soul occupies not only the whole universe, but also the whole of space. It changes not its place, but its consciousness. This is pure variety. Furthermore, instead of modulating consciousness from one vantage point to another, we will need to learn to extrapolate between several vantage points. The consciousness of future humanity may well be called stereoscopic consciousness. This applies equally to the mind, which will learn to extrapolate between thinking in terms of categories and grasping the wholeness of a situation. Creativity surfaces by reaching out from inside. Our subtle body now acts as a feedback system that helps us to be creative with our personality, which is actually a non-space-like form. Our subtle body now acts as a feedback system that helps us be creative with our personality, which is actually a non-space-like form. And this is, now we gain further insight about ourselves by discovering ourselves in the way that the different pictures of ourselves are superimposed and at the same time integrated in our personalities. As in a holograph, we can shift from one picture to another by modulating our focus. Thus, according to our attunement, we may recognize the innocent child in us within its distortion, intermeshed with the wisdom we may have acquired. Our progress in the inner journey is indicated here by our ability to extrapolate between these realities. So now, I'd like to put some music on, and as I do, I'd like for you to feel that you're getting into the consciousness of the essence of your being, a being of light embodying a unique aspect of the divine. Your soul is as vast as the universe, and your light is always in contact with the light of all beings in all realms. Your vibrations extend through time and space, past, present, and future, and beyond manifestation into the subtle realms. And as you do this, feel that you can modulate your consciousness to infuse the light of your being with any of the divine qualities, particularly if there's one you feel that you need or you'd like to manifest more in your life. And in this way, the qualities become living as well as transformed. So I'll play some music now. And as you gently bring your awareness back to being present in the room, know that you can keep open all of these vibrational levels. Experience the circulation of light that continually takes place in your being, the descending light from the divine, and the transcendent, the returning light, the transformed light, the gift of your being to the transcendent into all of existence. It takes place with each breath. And may we each use consciousness in the service of fulfilling our dharma, our sacred purpose in this life. To become instruments for the transfiguration of the world. And may the message of the One being spread far and wide through the unique light that comes from each of us and from everything. Amen.